Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome. You're listening to the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agin, host, founder, and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Regarding AmSpirit, remember, we're looking to add quality people to our stable of franchisees. This is a unique franchise opportunity in that it's geared for an aspiring entrepreneur professional to add on to what they're already doing. Again, all our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, our franchisees operate the AmSpirit Business Connections program. The rest of the week, they're accountants, attorneys, financial advisors, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kind. If you're interested, or if you know someone's interested, contact me. There's an email in the show notes, or you can use the one provided at the end of the podcast. Today we're going to talk about that next step. You're at a networking function, you get to meet somebody, exchange cards, and you follow up and you decide, hey, let's get together for coffee, let's get together for lunch. Or if you're involved with AmSpirit Business Connections, we have built into our program, I'm sure other organizations do as well, but we have built into our program a monthly activity where members are assigned to have lunch with another member in the chapter. Can be lunch, can be coffee, can be going out for drinks, whatever it is, but to get together sometime outside of the regular chapter meeting just to get to know one another better. Some chapters call them lunch assignments or lunch bunch. There's all sorts of different names, but that's an activity within AmSpirit Business Connections. Whatever the case, and for the purpose of this program, let's just call it lunch. We know it can be any number of other things, but just to keep it simple, you're at lunch, now what? When people come to me and ask me about these situations, okay, I've met with somebody, we've had our small talk, we've exchanged cards, now we've set ourselves up, we're going to have lunch. What should we be doing? What should that conversation be like? Well, let me start out by saying this. That is not a license to pitch them. They're not having lunch with you so they can be pitched by you. Now, it might be just the case that they really do want to learn about you and they're truly interested in purchasing, and that's a whole other situation. If it's just the two of you getting together to have lunch, to get acquainted, that's not an opportunity for you to put the hard sell on them, to have a veiled sales approach with them, where you're kind of asking leading questions, trying to get at what extent they need your services. Listen, all those things will happen in time if you just take your time and do things right. But what this lunch should be about, you guys getting to know each other, like each other, and trust each other. And that's what this lunch is about. That's what networking's about. It's about building relationships. So that sort of begs the question, what are some things that you can do during this lunch that you can help build the relationship? I have an approach that I like to follow. I don't follow it rigidly, but it's loosely outlined in my mind. So when I sit and have lunch with somebody I don't really know well, I'll go through it. The first thing I'll do is I'll try and discover common ground. I want to know about them. Where did they grow up? What part of town, perhaps? And if they're not from town per se, what brought them here? In the greater Columbus area, I find that there are relatively few people who were actually born and raised here. People came here for all sorts of reasons. A lot of people came here to go to school. There's certainly the Ohio State University, but beyond Ohio State University, within an hour of Columbus, are at least a dozen other quality colleges and universities that individuals attended, and that led them to starting their professional lives in Columbus, Ohio. Then there are other people who are brought to Columbus, Ohio professionally. They came here with L Brands, Nationwide Insurance, Wendy's International, some of the big employers, and they liked it and they decided to stay. And so there's a story there, and I like to delve into that story. And as I delve into that story, I'm looking for common ground. What sorts of things do we have in common? Where are they from? How they got here? All sorts of things that I can use to talk to them about and share my story and weave it with theirs. I also like to get at what their childhood was like, what they did growing up, what sorts of things. If they were in Utah, I ask if they skied. If they were in Minnesota, I might ask if they played hockey. If they were in Florida, I would ask questions about, hey, what'd you do for spring break if you lived in Florida when the rest of us Midwesterners, we go to Florida, what do you guys do? So I like to get at those sorts of things. People work to live. They don't live to work. So there's all sorts of things that interest them beyond what they do professionally, and they like talking about them. I also like to get what their current interests are, activities they do outside of their professional life. Do they have hobbies? Is there a sports team that they like to follow? I like to get at all these sorts of things just to bring it down to a human level. We're just two people talking, and make the situation as comfortable as possible. That's how people get to know you, like you, and trust you. And there's no set pattern. I don't say I'll spend 10 minutes here or anything like that. You can kind of feel it moving. Sometimes I'll have a conversation with somebody. In fact, I had a telephone conversation last week. We had an hour earmarked, and we spent literally 55 minutes talking about the personal stuff. And the last 5 minutes talking a little bit on business, and then committing to, hey, we're going to have another call because there was a reason why we were brought together, and we needed to try and figure that out. So there's no hard, fast rules how the personal stuff goes, and when you need to roll over the professional stuff. You'll know. It's just there's a lull there, and in time you get just good at discovering that lull, knowing when that lull happens, and moving over to more professional stuff. But when I move over to more professional stuff, I want to know how they get started doing what they're doing. There's a story there. Now, there are certainly people out there who say, I knew I wanted to be a dentist from the time I was 5, and that's what I've committed to, and that's what I do, or attorney, or whatever it might be. And there are those people who just were very focused from the get-go. But not everybody's like that. Everybody has a story. I mean, I have a story. If you had the opportunity to listen to the very, very first episode 000, I share my story. I have a law degree. I was a tax consultant. Doing what I do now, never would have guessed based on what I did in the past. And everyone else has that story as well. Most other people have that story as well. And so I want people to kind of share that story, to kind of get a sense as to their passion and what brought them to do what they're doing. But in addition to trying to get a sense as to how they got started doing what they're doing, I like to delve into who they work with. Now, for some people, it might be obvious. If I'm meeting with a realtor, I tend to know what that is. But a lot of the people I end up talking to are people who have businesses where it's not obvious as to who their clients might be. And so I really want to kind of dig in and try and understand what those clients look like. I want to know what might be some buzzwords or catchphrases that I need to listen to try and spot opportunities for them. And I know some of you are thinking right now, wow, you're learning about them. When did they ever learn about you? This is what I've found, is that the more I get people talking about their business, in the end, they want to be interested in me too. They turn the tables. Very few people are going to sit there and just allow themselves to talk and talk and talk and not mimic what you're doing and find out about you. And if you find you're with someone like that, just continue on with lunch and just know that it's probably not a great long-term relationship. And that's okay. Remember, networking is about giving. It's about giving and trusting that things will come back to you. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the things to give to them on the front end and just trust that it'll come back. And 9 times out of 10 it does, so I'm not terribly concerned about it. Another thing I'd like to do with respect to understanding them professionally is getting at who are some key centers of influences for them. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about their clients, and maybe I don't know who their clients are, but I might have the ability to introduce them to centers of influence. Maybe they need to know bankers, or maybe they need to know attorneys, or maybe they need to do consultants of particular time. What are things beyond clients that tend to help them? I try and get at those sorts of things and pull those out, get them thinking, get them talking about those sorts of things. Because if I bring that up in conversation and they talk about it, they'll likely flip the conversation, or it opens the door for me to kind of work in what I'm looking for. And then the last thing I try and get at is I try and get at referrals for them. talking about clients is one thing, but getting at what are referrals and what are good referrals for them. In short, I like to dig into their ABCs. If you're a member of AmSpirit Business Connections, you've likely done the exercise, the ABCs of asking for referrals. And if you haven't, that's something you need to have your director do at your chapter. If you're not a member of AmSpirit Business Connections and want to kind of catch up on what I'm talking about, if you listen to episode 35, the ABCs of asking for referrals, that will explain in more detail what I'm getting at. But when I say I want to get at people's ABCs, I want to find out three things. One, I want to find out their A referral. I want to find that referral. I want to find out what would be a referral that would make their month or their year. Something that they reasonably dream about when they're driving around in their car. I kind of want to know what the high end is, just to kind of gauge types of things that they're working with. And to me, that's important because I can find out from that who are some people I should be introducing them to, or who are some people I shouldn't be. But I also want to get at their B referral. Their B referral is, who are the people that they typically work with? What does a typical day look like? What does a typical client look like? What would be that typical referral? For a realtor, the houses you're working with, are they between $150,000 and $250,000? And then the last thing I want to get at is I want to get at their C referral. And what their C referral is, and if you tune into the interviews that I do on this podcast, I try and pull that out of my interview guests whenever it's appropriate. But the C referral is that referral that they're willing to service, but they're not necessarily excited about. The example I've used in podcasts is when I practice law, I would do people's wills, but I would never really be excited about it. I'd be willing to do it because it led to bigger things sometimes, and it always brought in some money, but I was never really excited about it. And so I want to get at with people, what is that C referral for them? What's that C referral? What's the thing that what's the bottom end? What are they willing to do? I think that the A, B's, and C's are important to know because that gives me a sense as the types of clients that they're looking to work with. I don't want to waste somebody's time by providing something that's just too little for them to handle. On the other end, I don't want to be sending somebody off to a referral situation where they're not really ready to handle it. So there's not a whole lot to this lunch. It's building a relationship. It's building the network. It's extending the know, like, and trust. I want to discover some common ground for them. I want to learn about their business and how they got started and what I should be listening for and looking for and trying to find them opportunities. And then I want to kind of delve into the A's, the B's, and the C's. What's a great referral? What's a typical thing you see? And what's the bottom end of what you're willing to work with? This is how I think you make the most of that lunchtime opportunity. Again, this next step is just that, a next step. Whether it's lunch, breakfast, coffee, drinks, whatever it is, it's just a next step. It doesn't give you the green light to sell to them, unless, of course, they're looking to be sold and want to know more about your product or service. But if it's just to get acquainted, it's not a sales opportunity. It's not a veiled sales pitch. It's just an opportunity to continue to build the relationship. Discover some common ground, continue to develop know, like, and trust, learn about where they came from, learn about client situations they're looking for, learn about their referrals, learn about key influencers that they might want to meet. If you do those things, chances are they'll turn the tables and want to know about you. And again, that relationship starts to build. It's about creating know, like, and trust.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.